the council time for Wednesday, August the 12th, and begin by approving the minutes of the meeting on August the 5th.
Move to approve, Council Chair.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the last meeting. All in favor say aye. Aye. The motion passes. And let's go, this is under old business. Let's begin with the Equestrian Facility Code. And those individuals that are here to present.
So Mitch, if you'd like to present what you sent out, we put your document on the line, just do a brief history and then what the specific request is of the council.
Certainly, thank you. As Mitch Nichols, I am the Code Administration Director for the county, and I'm going to give you a short summary on the current status of the equestrian, rural equestrian facilities that are currently operating absent required permits, and the status of the process that we'll be utilizing to adjudicate those. In 2018 and 2019, code violation notices were issued to owners of certain residential properties upon which county code enforcement officers verified the existence of unpermitted equestrian, commercial equestrian businesses. In response to the notices, Clark County equestrian community and supporters turned out at a council meeting and expressed their concern about code enforcement approaching the equestrian community and asking them to discontinue their operations. They also expressed concern about the high cost of compliance with the land use hearing process that's necessary to get the permits and the building permits necessary to occupy structures for commercial purposes on their properties. They asked council to stop the enforcement actions or at least hold them in abeyance until the codes could be revised to meet their needs. Subsequently, a public forum was scheduled in March. Unfortunately, due to the COVID emergency and the prohibition on public gatherings, we had to postpone that. Notices were sent out in accordance with that postponement. Since the issuance of the notices, one violator has filed an appeal, which is pending. The nearby residents have continued to experience and report related impacts on a weekly and oftentimes daily basis, and have expressed the frustration with the delay in county enforcement to put a stop to the unpermitted activity. Currently, our enforcement appeal process, which I'll give you a brief summary on, to date, one of the cited property owners requested an appeal. The others are working to comply or have complied to preference it. An enforcement appeal must be scheduled before a hearing examiner, of which only one is assigned to hear enforcement appeals. Enforcement appeals are only heard on the fourth Thursday of the month. There are currently 2 enforcement appeal hearings we need to schedule. The next available dates for scheduling enforcement appeals are September 24th and October 22nd. We're also competing with land use hearings on those dates. Our assigned hearing examiner also hears the land use applications and review applications on the second or Thursdays of the month. And our hearing examiner has 2 land use hearings already scheduled for August 27th and 2 on September 24th. No hearings, however, have been scheduled for October 22nd, which is the 4th Thursday in October. There are currently 2 enforcement appeal hearings pending for our assigned hearing examiner's hearing queue. One is the equestrian violation. The other is a commercial business and another commercial business in a residential area. Council options. The Code Administration Department requests direction from council as to how we might proceed given the stakeholders and competing interests regarding use of rural residential properties and buildings for commercial equestrian venues. The options include moving forward with the appeals hearing at the next opportunity in accordance with our established code enforcement appeal procedure, convene a public participation process, web-based, similar to the recent listening sessions and the one you had tonight, to hear pro and con responses to draft code revisions prepared by staff and ideas for specific changes that mitigate the impacts of rural commercial equestrian facilities while still allowing the activity level sufficient to support a rural home business or equestrian business. Public participation would require respondents to address the draft revisions and propose their own specific revisions. Some of you may have heard from a number of equestrian industry proponents who have expressed their interest in those code revisions as well. The last option is to create and convene an equestrian or rural home business code review committee comprised of the stakeholders from all sides of the issue to develop a specific recommendation for council's consideration. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you have.
Questions of the council? Okay, if there are no questions of the council, then I guess.
Madam Chair, I was trying to find my mute button, sorry, I do have a question.
Okay, all right.
Could we scroll, I'm trying to look at this whole document, could we scroll to the bottom, please? That's why I couldn't find my mute button, thank you. So, Mitch, is it one of any of these, or are these potentially a process? So maybe option 2 and option 3 as part of the process versus, so that, I mean, are you asking for pick one of these 3 or?
No. The council could choose to pick all 3 if you wanted to, or as components thereof of a whole. Moving forward with the hearing at the next opportunity, I support that simply because that's the process we use, and we need to be responsive to the folks in the community that are concerned with violations in their neighborhoods. As far as the public participation process, we don't necessarily have to go that route, but it is a good way under the current circumstances to engage the public in a public forum so others can sit in and listen and observe. Convening an equestrian and rural home business code review committee could be an outcome of that public participation process, or it could be done as a standalone effort.
Okay, thank you. That seems to make sense to me that we were to try to find some opportunity to have a public process, that maybe this business code review committee could be an outcropping of that. And I think, I think just generally, I would be in favor of having some sort of public participation, whether it be like a listening session of some kind. I mean, I think other jurisdictions are doing a lot of work, even though it's not ideal. We're still being able to get some work done if we find a way for folks to provide their input and feedback to us. And from there, I think it does make sense maybe to do a committee so that we can get some direct and focused work on what code options might be acceptable to the broader equestrian community. So, sorry, questions and comments, so thank you.
You bet.
Other questions or comments from council?
Madam Chair, I do have comments.
Councilman McAfee, go ahead.
So it is disappointing that the pandemic has really thrown a block from our community events that we were hoping to hold. I want to really emphasize, from the very beginning, we had discussed a split, separating issues. So the whole equestrian community, and I've been trying to follow up with different stakeholders, the whole equestrian community came to that first session, one under a false assumption that all of a sudden the county was going to start cracking down on all the equestrian facilities, and that wasn't true. It was complaint-based, and I believe at the time we had 4 or 5 complaints. The other area that really came out and persists, and that I support changing, there's a lot of costs in our code that shouldn't be there for equestrian facilities. There's code that's inexplicable, basically the quarantining of animals, a curfew, and installation of stalls, things of that nature that we can't even find the source of how it got into our code. So there is a need for code reform so that people can have lawful businesses with reasonable code. So that's the issue to be separated. Now, of those 4 or 5 complaints that we were dealing with, they all had to do with abatement of nuisance, waste, runoff, noise, traffic, dust. I haven't heard a single proponent from the greater equestrian community that's against keeping that portion of the code. I mean, that's the code that protects the neighborhood and quality of life out in the greater community. So the reform of our code needs to happen. And I agree with Councilor Olson. However, we can move forward. It's been very difficult during this pandemic, and quite frankly, the reaching out I've done to some of the stakeholders has brought minimal participation, meaning emails of suggested code changes, things of that nature. It's been hard to get the last couple of months, so we need to make a greater effort, whether it's a listening session, because we need to keep moving forward in the reform of that code. Now, regarding the appeals process, it should go forward. Enforcement of nuisance should go forward. If this was a case of enforcement against someone that didn't have their horse quarantined during the night hours or have insulation to have stalls that were soundproof, which are, from every source I've heard, that's unhealthy for animals. You know, if code enforcement had to do with that kind of code that we hope to change, I would say, yeah, cease and desist. But where it involves noise, traffic, dust, waste runoff, basic issues having to do with the health and welfare of our community, those very few cases that you had brought, they need to come to conclusion. The only other comment I would make about it is, raises the issue of, do we need more than one examiner? Should we have different examiners for different purposes? You listed a wide variety of case subject matter that our one hearing examiner needs to deal with. So that seems to be a problem. If we can't get a case to appeal within months, that's a real problem. In the meantime, what happens with enforcement? You know, I've seen the email from the one facility that you have the enforcement action against. Go without cessation. Basically, ignoring all your orders while the appeal is pending. So I'm wondering how, I guess that's a question. What do we deal with those ongoing violations?
Yeah, I thank you for your observations, Sally. And to your point, the enforcement process is a bit long tooth in the sense that it takes a long time to get to enforcement if we have violators who do not comply with the requirements. Our current process involves filing liens against the property and lien penalties, but we do not have a process for summary abatement where the county goes in and prepares. We have a process, a judicial process, to go in and order a summary abatement under very limited circumstances where there is a threat to the public, an imminent threat of safety and harm to the public caused by the issue. And we would issue a cease and desist order and order the buildings vacated and boarded up and secured and remove all of the offending violations or abate them to the extent necessary to make things safe. That is not an option that council has chosen to go in the past. It's not a practice that we have, but it is available to us if we go that route. Normally, that would be pulled out of our hat when we need to abate a very dangerous situation, like a partially destroyed home that's either burned partially down to the point of imminent collapse, as an example, or business or structure, that's adjacent to a public right-of-way that can't be properly secured. We would then, if the owner can't do it, we would want to go in and abate it, safe it up, and then bill the property owner for those costs. That and the foreclosure process are really the only teeth we have in enforcing or forced enforcement or forced abatement. Other than that, the liens are filed month after month, year after year, and until the properties either change hands and they're compelled to clean the title. And then at that time, they come in hat in hand asking for a discount or reduced penalties to settle the case so they can move and sell the property. We can change that process, however, and make it more responsive. There are models that are much more robust, involving collection agencies and so forth that really do exert a substantial amount of pressure for compliance, to gain compliance when individuals have not taken the step to voluntarily do so and the orders have been issued. Perhaps that's a discussion for another day.
Right, thank you. Did that answer your question, Councilman Steve?
Yes, so sir, here as far as the options, I do want to move forward with the book reform as we've discussed, and however we can get the input from the equestrian community, I really want to aggressively explore that. And two, I'm encouraging code enforcement to move forward with the cases that are pending. Unless you tell us that it has to do with those portions of the code we're hoping to change.
These do not. They deal specifically with the use and occupancy of the buildings without proper permits and construction verification for safety.
Other questions or comments for the council?
Madam Chair.
Council Blum.
So I think looking at these options, I think the highest priority for me is number 2. I think the code issues go far beyond some of the things that were discussed. Those are part of it, but I think there's more to it than that. So I think moving forward as quickly as we can on getting a public process hearing from the equestrian community as well as the neighbors so we can get through some of these code language, identify what are the biggest challenges and prioritize them. I would agree that item 3 could be an outtake of that. My concern with that is timeline, so maybe that's a second step. I see that being a much longer term process that doesn't get us the changes and the code that we need. But I guess that'd be a follow-up to continue to monitor the code. So those would be the highest priorities for maybe 2 and then possibly 3 as an outcome. And if we're looking at October for number 1, I think that gives us some time to make some changes, and if there are current enforcement actions that we may be looking at, that would perhaps give some time to make some changes and have that information to the code enforcement or to the hearing examiner during that hearing.
Okay, thank you. I guess, so,
Yes.
Okay, Councilor Lynn.
I generally agree with what has come forward. So I do think that we should move ahead with the appeals hearing for October, and agree that, as Councilor Blum said, there's a possibility that there will be more information that can inform that hearing by the time we get there, and that a public process is absolutely necessary to get the input we need to modify the code. I appreciate the way that you've written this up as far as a preliminary sort of outline of what you would see that process looking like. And I'd love to see a bit more detail of the timing and how it would be presented as far as what would be given to the public in advance, how this would be managed, so that we can really develop a public process in the time of COVID that makes sure that everybody does have the equal access they need, but also some structure for how this is going to move forward. And if a committee is an outcome of that for moving forward, then I think that would be great, but I would prioritize having the public process before convening a committee.
Great, thank you. And yes, that's not a problem at all. I've actually started looking into it.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Ross.
Yeah, and I think too, this process that we're going through here in terms of trying to define a public participation process for this topic could help create the framework for other opportunities where we need public participation, and so we can kind of get back to doing the work that we haven't been able to do because of this kind of question of public participation. So if we can come up with a framework for this, then we can use it for the other work that we need to do going forward, so.
Great, and I've reached out to community planning and Director Orgiaco, as they do utilize a lot of public participation in their land use process and co-development process. So yeah, I think we can find something that really will hit the mark.
And Mitch, I'm assuming that a lot of the folks that were involved in the hearing before and wanted to be involved in changes, et cetera, and look at them carefully, will be particularly targeted to participate in this public participation plan. I agree that the third option may be part of an outcome of number 2, although it seems to me they could even be simultaneous. Unless, I'm assuming that option number 3 is broader in the outlook, is that correct?
It is. It's not, option number 3 is more focused and consolidated, and we take representatives or stakeholder representatives of the whole, of the larger community, and bring them together in maybe 8 or 10 member committee, including having us there as the facilitators. What we're thinking about in option 2 is similar to a moderated input process where participants are given an opportunity to view some draft revisions in advance and then respond in the time slot they've been given for 20 or 30 people to respond as representatives of the whole to address specific issues they see with either the revisions or propose some of their own. But giving it, the objective of both processes is guidance that the public needs to give us in what their tolerance and preferences are for these types of facilities. And then going back to a work committee to actually put it together, ensuring that we have stakeholder representatives there who can ensure that their interests that they expressed in the meetings and the public participation process are actually included in the work itself.
Well, I'm wondering, I guess my question really was more to the fact that it looked to me like if this is only dealing with equestrian rural home business codes, that I can see why we do number 2 and then move to number 3. But if it encompasses more than just equestrian businesses for the rural home business code, then I think that number 3 appears to be broader. Am I looking at that wrong, Mitch? Number 3 only with equestrian rural home business?
Only with equestrian home businesses, but there are myriad sections in the code that deal with land use and building construction and so forth. It's a very broad concept, that's correct. So you're right. Number 3 would be inclusive of all the factors that result in the codes that we currently have.
Okay. So I think, let me hear what I think I heard from the council is that the majority of you want to go ahead and definitely begin this public process, and in this public process, create steps and opportunities so that if there are other things that we want to look at during this COVID-19, we have sort of a path to use, see if it's good. Did I hear that everybody wants to move forward with the hearing process, or how many would like to?
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Sure. Yes, go ahead.
Mitch, you said that all of the ongoing enforcement actions are nuisance-based.
No, the one that is for the appeal hearing, we had to, we've been working with our representative prosecuting attorney it was reissued just to deal with the building, the unpermitted buildings that are occupied and utilized for the business itself. The zoning issues, the definition of the equestrian facility were issues that were previously raised, but we didn't feel that because of the ambiguity in the code, we didn't feel we were strong enough on that issue to move forward with it. So we amended the notice and reissued it. So the appeal hearing will just be for the lack of building permits and occupancy certificates, ensuring the structures are safe for occupancy.
Okay, so I mean, if we are only enforcing something that hasn't necessarily been a nuisance complaint, I would have some concerns about moving too quickly with one until we have a chance to clarify what those building permits should be, because like that's one of the more onerous areas of the code that doesn't make sense in terms of some of those. So I would have some concerns with doing that enforcement until we look at what is a realistic site plan review and occupancy process for equestrian facilities.
Which those permit applications would engage. That's correct. I mean, if they comply, and our objective is just to ensure that, we'd love to have this individual come forward and submit the initial application package to begin the review process, to make an effort and voluntarily limit the activity on the property to that's permitted for a small private equestrian operation without actually doing the big events that are occupying the structures right now that are creating the problem. So the objective here is to stop the invitation of the community to the facility through the building code compliance process until there is a safe building for them to gather and there's a way to permit the activity. Right now, the only thing they can do on that property would be board 6 horses privately and train them themselves. Up to 6 horses, but they can't board more than that and can't have public events on the premises.
How many horses are they boarding now?
They say they only boarded 5, I believe, permanently.
Okay.
But again, this is where the ambiguity in the code exists. It talks about private boarding facilities and it talks about equestrian facilities, and there's quite a bit of challenge in the interpretive sense, trying to figure out what type of activity it is. They've gone to great lengths to try and fit their operation into what they believe is their right to operate their farm. They've argued that because the site is a historic dairy, that they've grandfathered the codes. There's been a lot of different responses relevant to the zoning requirements that we initially cited. But just focusing on the safety issues is where we wanted to take this. That's the highest priority for this particular case.
So, when you said, so do you anticipate then that via this process that the potential code changes would directly impact this business owner, homeowner, horse boarding facility in a way that would potentially change the circumstance they're in right now?
They could. It's possible. The challenge for them is that they're in an R15 district, which is very limited in its use as residential, for residential development. And you can have some home business there. They've got a fairly good-sized property, however, that might, because of its size, give them, if the code revisions were put in place that treated it as for example, a large or major rural home business for commercial equestrian activity, there would be some certain limitations. They would be allowed to operate pretty much as they are now, with the exception of the number of vehicles and the number of visitors on any given day, and perhaps limitations on the operation hours and days and so forth. They could, and what would happen is, as Councilor Blum pointed out, if we get to the hearing in October and there has been formative development of the rules that would impact the way the individual would comply, we would include that in our recommendations. In other words, this has been a lot of the reaction from the community. The supporters was The fact that the idea that there was so much to do to comply, and if it were easier, it would be, and less costly, and less time consuming, that they would be willing to do it. So we'd certainly like to take a look at that, and if we have a path forward by the time the hearing arrives, that would influence the outcome of that hearing, or at least our summary for the hearing. And potentially, it could even result in dismissal of the case as a result of the changes. You know, for example, that pre-existing buildings didn't require occupancy certificates. If they were agricultural buildings that had been built on a premises and were legal at the time of the build, then you converting those for use under code revisions would not require building permits, as an example.
Right.
In that case, our case would have no basis for moving forward.
So then I guess for me then to follow up with Councilor Blum's comments would be, whether it makes sense to continue with this process or put it on hold until we deal with the code.
Well, I anticipate being able to produce the public participation in right around 30 days, which is well in advance of the appeal hearing date. And that would give the better part of the month of September and early October to have something before council for review and adoption or consideration in the way of revision. Now, we're willing to work quickly.
Yeah, I would be actually in favor of waiting until we have made the changes as well. Or at least that's what I think I'm hearing from Councilor Blum and Councilor Olson, that I would, even though the hearing is set further away because of the situation of the hearings examiner, unavailability of the hearings examiner just because of various circumstances right now. I would just as soon go ahead with this public process and put the other in hold. And then also, if we need to create this committee after the public process, that would be a good thing too. So, it's a further discussion then from
I'm going to weigh in again because we just merged what I was hoping that we would separate. So the complaint, we're going on. Mitch, what was the original complaint brought regarding traffic, noise, dust, the ongoing unpermitted business? When was the first complaint brought to the county?
That occurred back in 2018.
Okay, thank you. So there's no precipitous move forward. This is just on the backs of all the neighbors, and this would apply to any change we make in the rural community where people want to keep it rural and not move businesses of any kind right next door to them that impact them in a negative way, depending on the size of the property, setback, the ability to handle traffic, the abatement of noise and dust. By pausing this enforcement action by one person who is flouting all of those abatement processes, they're flouting the rights of their neighbors. I think that really is the wrong message. We need to continue forward on this process, and in the meantime, address these other issues. I don't see us really changing course where we just allow a free-for-all in any rural business where it would negatively impact, whether it's by entertainment, bands, even winery events that are in the rural area do have constraints and permitting rules. This isn't precipitous action. This is just the opposite of it, that it's been going on for years. So I would be against delaying in this particular case, the abatement, again, if it had to do with the soundproofing or other onerous requirements that the code has without explanation, you know, I would say, yeah, we need to stop that. But this is, even though you're bringing it under the building code as a tool based on the lead lawyer's advice, you know, the real essence of this is it's been really impacting in a negative way all of the adjacent landowners in this one property.
Did I mishear? I thought, Mitch, that this was not a nuisance-related appeal, but it's a permit-related appeal.
No, the building code, the building, occupying the buildings without a permit is a specific public nuisance as defined in our code that deals with noise, odors, and animal refuse. What we're talking about is the building occupancy utilized as a commercial structure for the purpose of gathering people together to participate in equestrian events, the use of the private roads and obstruction of private roads with vehicles related to that work, and the noise created by the activity itself. And those things are all, you know, the noise itself is enforced by the sheriff's office, but the building code is enforced by the community development department and the code administration department. And occupying a building that has not been deemed safe for occupancy is hazardous. It is there is no compliance with accessibility. There's no compliance with necessary sanitation. No compliance with the structural aspects of the building to ensure that it protects the people that are in it, and that they have adequate egress in the event of an emergency. A lot of things out there that we have to concern ourselves with. And if we have to rescue people because of a potential fire or collapse or something like that, we also put our own first responders in jeopardy. So, coupled with the fact that you're dealing with live animals, large live animals at the time, that it can be quite a trick to deal with all that. We just want to make sure that if it is allowed on the property, that it's operated in compliant and inside buildings that have been deemed safe for occupancy.
That answers your question, Councilor Olson?
Yeah, I think we need to try to move on. So yeah, wherever we decide to go with number one.
I also heard in this discussion that there could be changes that would dismiss this particular appeal. So there's kind of some mixed messages here. I believe there are 3 neighbors near this facility. It isn't like it's 50 people that are being affected. And while I understand what might be adversely affecting 2 or 3 people in the county, I want to be careful also about how it affects the entire equestrian community in the future. Maybe this is just one owner that is not compliant with something, but and I haven't delved that deeply into this complaint. I just know that what I do know is that it's about 3 neighbors that it's affecting. And that is very important, and their quality of life is important too. But I want to be careful not to destroy what we have in this county with our equestrian community. Has anybody changed their mind throughout this discussion? I don't see anything or hear anything. So I think what we'll do, Mitch, I think what the majority of the council wants to do is convene the public participation thing for any changes that we're going to do to the equestrian code.
Great. I'll put together a summary of that process after I've consulted with some of our team members and see what we can do to give you not only a process for this, but a process for other public participation.
Okay, thank you very much. Going to the next subject, which is the listening session number 3 schedule.
Yes, Chair Clarion, this is Kathleen. So just before we move on, I wanted to make sure, I hear the majority of the council wanted Mitch to hold off on moving forward with any of the enforcement. And if, or the other option is we could bring this back next week as well, if there wants to be more discussion on council.
Madam Chair, I think we had a good discussion, and certainly I, as much as anyone, want to protect the equestrian community. I think it's good discussion that should be in the public, and I think you should literally have a vote whether to stop the enforcement action that Mitch has been pursuing for the last 2 years, so that everyone's on record.
Madam Chair, I don't know that we have all the information right now to decide. I think if we can get through number 2 prior to that hearing, then I have no problem with moving forward. So I would like us to prioritize the issues that are currently being disputed first in those policy questions, so that we can maybe try and fix these before it gets there. But I know we're talking about almost 2.5 months out. We need a lot of work done in that time. But if we get to early October and it's clear that we don't have answers to these yet, I think it would be important to revisit it at that point. So let's prioritize what the current enforcement actions are in terms of our policy review, because those, and actually I wanted to say, I think you hit it exactly right when you were saying this affects a lot more equestrian owners than just the one. I went out and toured a couple of the facilities, and they all have similar concerns that if this is the strict enforcement, there will not be equestrian operations because of some of these site plan and building occupancy reviews. So they may not be enforcement now, but all it takes is one person to come in and file a complaint, and now we have more issues. So I think we prioritize addressing those issues, and then subsequently work on the other things as well.
Okay, other comments of council?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that this is a more reasonable plan going forward. I think it provides the opportunity to devote, because the appeal process is so far out, we can just get started here and then address it as we get closer. So, council's lost for that.
Okay, and I would say that can happen basically simultaneously. We don't have to say put this on a hold. However, if we see that the public participation process and the changes are going to affect what may happen in this hearing, it may be a time to place a hold on it. Is that what you said, Councilor Glom? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So, Mitch is probably not on any longer, if he is.
I can relay the information to him.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, did you hear that, Mitch? I guess.
I did.
Okay. It sounds like we're not going to actually put a pause on it because of the fact that the hearings is so far out. If we see that we are not progressing properly with this public participation and code changes with the existing rural business, then we will put a hold on it. If we see there may be changes that really actually do affect that particular case.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And just keep in mind, this will inform the entirety of the initiative that we've been working on for quite some time. So we have where appropriate and in scale other rural activities as well. I think these are very much overlapping code issues where it impacts neighbors and neighborhoods and traffic and livability. So, it's broader than the question. So I appreciate the outcome of the discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So you have your marching orders next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, moving on to old business and listening session number 3 schedule.
Yes.
I don't know. Go ahead.
So, as the council
Yeah.
has agreed to, the third listening session is not open to the public, therefore you can only have 2 counselors attending at any given time. I have put together some options. These, I want to make it clear, I did not assign number based on districts or anything, it's just an arbitrary 1 through 5. The first option, 1 counselor would not participate, it would be split into 2 sessions. The second option, 1 counselor would participate in 2 sessions to keep 2 counselors per session. And then the third one is to have every counselor participate in 1 session, therefore 1 counselor would be independently participating. Again, there's other options. I just wanted to have a starting point for your discussion on how you would like who to be at what sessions. I know that there's been some questions about that in the previous conversations we've had.
Okay, so I just want to say that I have made statements in one-on-ones and in a couple of sessions that I'm a little ambivalent about this whole third listening session, mainly because it's private and this is a public forum. However, I am willing to participate, and I would just state that if I participate, I would prefer that it be from 6 to 6:40. So I would be in either either option 2 or 3, one of those counselors. And I will take, anybody else who'd like to divvy that up, or whether we draw straws or what. So I take comments about these options.
I would just state, I'm not sure how this is going to come out, but I want to participate in the entirety of the sessions, and I know that's not possible with the number of counselors you have and the time slots. So I'll plug in wherever you tell me to plug in, but I'm open from 6 to 8.
So maybe maybe better ways to share if there's any constraints that any counselor has, or preference. Otherwise, we can.
Okay, let's do that. Are there any constraints? I would imagine we all kind of block this out. So we have, from 6 to 8. Are there preferences that councilors want to choose, or do they mind just being told? we don't.
I lean toward, I don't see constraints. I lean towards option 2. I think that it's helpful to have 2 of us in there at all times, and that way, if there's follow-up discussion, that there's multiple people that heard something that was raised, and so I think it's easier if we come back and start talking about what possible action steps might be. I think having 2 listeners in there at a time is preferable, so I would say option 2, I think, would be my preference, and I'm open to. The only thing I would say is that I think whoever is in that does 2 sessions, try and keep them back to back, so it's not logging off and trying to log back on. So whoever's in 6:40 to 7:20, one person stays on through 8 o'clock.
Okay.
And I would also say I have no constraints really. I'm happy to whatever from 6 to 8, wherever you want to plug me in. And I think to Councilor's point, I would agree. I think having two counselors at a time, so more than one person is hearing what's being said, I think is valuable. So you can just plug me in wherever you see fit.
Okay, Councilor Lynch, any comments?
I also think that the second option is the better option, with all of us participating and 2 counselors in every single time. No constraints, happy to go later.
Okay. Okay, should we just leave that up to Councilor Medley after your mic up?
Yeah, so concur with number 2. I guess still the back of my mind, if I don't understand it, if we have a counselor listening without participating otherwise, it's hard to imagine how that actually violates the meeting laws. But if that's what our lawyer is still sticking with, I mean, I guess it's what we have to live with without a counter opinion. But Kathleen, that's what our lawyer tells us, that, I mean, even a counselor just lurking, listening, but not deliberating or speaking, that somehow violates our open meeting laws.
That is my understanding. I know Emily is on, but I believe that anytime that 3 counselors are there, and there will be potentially some speaking and providing feedback or asking questions, that would constitute an open public meeting. And Emily is on if she has anything to add to that.
Yes, that was my recommendation, and just to, I'll let you know, I did check in with the city because they held similar sessions and they came to the same conclusion as well.
Okay.
A clarifying question on that.
Sure.
Councilor Mendy raised, I think, a point that we have the ability with technology to actually keep us from talking. And so if we are not panelists, if we are only listeners in this, I'm guessing that there's no, and they probably haven't considered this, but I wonder if that's something that we can try and get an answer to. If we are actually not even available to do anything but listen, and it's only the moderators and the speakers, I see that as being no different than if we were all at an event where we were hearing a presentation, which happens regularly for our nonprofits and things like that. So maybe we pursue option 2, but look and see if there's a way, if we are not made panelists on the WebEx, so we can all just be there and listen, if that might also give us a way to all participate for the full time.
I agree. Go ahead.
Okay, the concern I have is that this is a council-sponsored event through, at least that's how it's been presented. If it was someone else that was sponsoring the event and we were just invited along with many other individuals, so that isn't the way this is working. This is an invitation just to the council to privately listen for this particular session. And so the taking of testimony, even without deliberation or asking questions, the taking of testimony, public testimony, can be one of those factors that triggers an open public meeting.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not public. That's my concern. It has been my concern. This is private, and they're not allowing it to be recorded or have anybody else listen. And I'm not arguing with your findings, Emily. I'm just saying, they're clearly saying this is private. And they are actually sponsoring. They're sponsoring every one of these sessions, and they have control of the electronic stuff. This isn't the county that's doing it. It's these 4 organizations that are actually hosting this, and we are invited to it. So,
that's a good point. I would say that this isn't sort of a frequently litigated issue. So what does it mean to have a meeting where more than 2 counselors are present, where there's a potential for taking public testimony? It is considered if there is a violation, even though there isn't an action that could be invalidated, there is a potential for attorneys to even fine. So I just wanted to give the more conservative approach. Obviously, this is a decision that the council can make, but I just wanted to make sure the council was aware of the potential consequences.
and as
I don't think I have enough time before Wednesday to try to get opinion out of the AG's office.
this is the 26th listening session, not...
Why?
Okay. Actually, Emily, when I recall my orientation that was taken at WASAC, the person that gave the public meetings presentation was pretty strict. She said, don't even ride in the same car with 3 counselors to anything. I mean, it seems, so I understand how this finding is what you have stated. I'm certainly not arguing with it, making the statement that, this is a little bit different circumstance than ordinary, but we may, as you say, somebody may sue us. And then we have attorney fees, so. Any other comments?
One other addition that I'd like to talk about in the listening sessions is I did send out the ground rules from the moderator to the council this morning. And I have received back some, most are, or not most, but some are okay with it. But I just want, in case there's any edits that the council has, I wanted to provide the opportunity right now under this agenda item so that we can provide that information to the moderator early afternoon.
Council Messages, did you have a comment?
I guess that's an invitation to unmute myself. So, yeah, I had an objection to 5B because it seemed to open the door to any random comment about any comment that a particular counselor would have made. And I just see it as an open door to encourage divisiveness and vitriol, like we saw very momentarily in that first session by the agencies themselves. So I would delete that paragraph because I think it's unnecessary. It doesn't get to the purpose of the listening session. And I think it just is a gaping hole to invite divisiveness.
Can we put that up on the screen? Does anybody have that? I'm looking for it on my computer.
Can we give her the ability to share?
I will get it up on the screen here momentarily.
Share about the safari. Should be able to.
5B.
Now, I'm confused by your statement. You said you want to remove 5B?
You can't?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up myself, but yes, I think it was 5B.
What 5 says is, making remarks about an individual instead of commenting on a position or action asserted by a public official. And the 5 actually states, communication guidelines. Persons addressing the council and council members will refrain from conduct, statements, or remarks that are disruptive to conducting council business, including, and then it goes A, B, C, and Gary is suggesting that B be removed. And because it's in there, it almost, I would agree that it almost sets something up so that so that one could make comments. Keeping it, to a commenting on a position or action. It could be amended to say commenting on an action asserted by, then it'd be debatable what constitutes an action, or what's the definition of it.
So when read with 5, though, it essentially says people will refrain from making remarks about an individual instead of commenting on a position or action. So I feel like it's prohibitive not allowing it, and maybe that's where I'm missing the concern.
Gary?
I was able to pull it up on my own computer, so I'm looking.
It's on the screen.
Yeah, you know what, so I may have misread it when I initially read it this morning. So if that's the position of the moderator, I'm okay with it then.
Okay. We're good to go then, I guess, huh?
Thank you. And I did get confirmation this morning that the moderator will be sending this to the participants ahead of time, and we'll also address it at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to new business. Public health proposal for food and establishment COVID-19 operational support.
Good morning, councilors.
Good morning.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Allen Melnick, Public Health Director and Health Officer. I have honor ready to do the presentation here. Richard Paul, who's our Chief mentioned our food safety program, and Jack Hodge, who's our environmental public health director. They're going to talk about this proposal, and thanks to Councilor Plum for bringing this to our attention, about economic relief for food establishments in COVID-19. Steve Bridges is there, and Jeanette is there. I'll let you guys take it away.
I gotta find it in my email again.
Bridget, why don't you go ahead and just start going through your proposal? Okay. Good morning, councilors. Thank you for taking time today to consider this proposal. The food safety program is requesting use of CARES Act funds in the amount of $1,128,000 plus administration fees to assist food establishment owners in their efforts to recover from immediate financial impacts incurred by COVID-19 related restrictions imposed on their businesses. Many brick and mortar restaurants temporarily closed when food service was limited to delivery and takeout. Some remain closed even now as indoor dining is limited to 60% capacity. Caterers and multiple event vendors were forced to cancel existing contracts when events were halted. After 5 months, even now after 5 months, private and public events are largely restricted to no more than 5 people outside of a household. And operations for most mobile units have halted due to the cancellation of events. Annual permit renewals are invoiced every month. So every month I speak with owners who share with me the additional efforts and challenges of operating a food establishment during these times. They call in search of any financial relief that may be available because every little bit is helping them. Fort County currently has 1,761 active food permits. 73 have closed since January. 25 are on a deferred permit plan, and 17 are on a partial permit payment plan. The deferred permit renewal, I'm sorry, Janice, you're on mute. Thank you. I just wanted to add things to that, and it's that deferred payment and the partial payment was not available to food establishments prior to COVID. That is something the food team and under Bridget's leadership has been added to support the food establishments. Yes, thank you. Typically, permit invoices are to pay in full. The owners have been very grateful for these options, again, because every financial union has been helping their businesses open. The food establishments proposed to be eligible for CARES Fund disbursement include level 1, 2, and 3 restaurants, mobile units, caterers, and multiple event vendors with annual revenues under $1 million. The amount proposed to be dispersed to each permit holder is the amount that they paid for their 2020 permit, which is a range of $258 to $1,835. The disbursement of these funds is not fee relief. All of the food establishments eligible for fund disbursement paid a 2020 permit, and they will be invoiced for their 2021 permit. The CARES funds dispersed to food establishment owners can be used at their discretion for any operating expenses, including rent or monthly loan payments, wages, employee benefits, taxes, typical operating costs, or additional costs that were incurred because of COVID-19 compliance measures. The distribution of CARES funds to food establishment owners would be an additional step towards helping stabilize our local economy and preserving jobs. I thank you for considering these proposals, financial assistance, and I'm available for questions that you may have.
Questions of council? I don't see any. to,
Madam Chair,
yes, Council Blum.
do we have someone from the auditor's office that can give us an update on how much of the CARES Act funding we've already allocated? Maybe that's a better question, Kathleen, I suppose.
Yeah, but I don't believe they're on today. I did hear that the majority of the current COVID money has been allocated, and there may be a little bit left in the contingency, like maybe $1 million, for any unforeseen, that I can follow up with them.
You want to wait for that? Yeah, go ahead.
Good.
Go ahead.
As far as action steps, I would like to add this to a list of projects that we could spend more money on if we had that. We had heard some other things from community services last week or the week before, so I would be, not necessarily approving it today, but saying let's put this on a list that we could put together to submit to Commerce or to have ready to go for Commerce if they do put together a process to release those additional funds that they are still withholding.
Madam Chair? I agree.
Go ahead, Council Olson.
Yeah, also, if we do have additional funds in contingency, if it's not the whole million or maybe there's an opportunity to take action on this at some point in the future once we verify what CARES Act funding is still potentially available.
Council Manager, did you have a comment?
Just partly concurring, I'm hoping that we could put money into this, and I hope we get our full source of that $166 million that's really should be coming to us. We need to spend it locally in appropriate ways, and this is a good place to spend it.
All right. So do we need an actual motion and a vote on this, Kathleen, or?
You can certainly do an action today, or we can put a staff report together for council decision or recommendation for Tuesday, and then we'll have confirmation as well on the funding available.
On the funds, okay. Is the council in agreement that we can do this Tuesday? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let's do it Tuesday then. We'll get the information from our auditor's office and have the staff report on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Melvin. And moving on then to item number 2.2, 2.3, Washougal School District BA. Chris Cook and Oliver.
We actually do have 2.2. It's on the COVID-19 testing supplies. This is a follow-up from the last council time.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize. I didn't mean to X you out. Dr. Melvin, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Am I muted? No. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. So I sent you all some information. I think well, I forwarded to Kathleen. I think you got on this morning. So one of the things, we've reached out to providers in terms of getting a report about, supplies they have in hand, the machines that they're using, and as you can see from the materials I sent you, most of the providers have not responded, which I think isn't surprising given the amount of work it is to put these together. But I think you do have I did send you a report that the Vancouver Clinic put together that they could provide each week in terms of their testing capacity or supplies. Honestly, I'm not sure, given the issues with the supply chain, we've been asking providers to do this. I'm not sure how a weekly report like that is going to be useful. We've been having conversations. We meet with the providers weekly. I know from talking to them what they have and what they're facing. For example, East Health Southwest currently has adequate testing supplies, and they're able to use. Thankfully, they're now using Northwest Labs for their PCR tests because Northwest Labs has 24-hour turnaround time. It's an in-state lab. The Vancouver Clinic, and I think I may have mentioned this to you at the last Board of Health meeting, they've had difficulties getting supplies to their Abbott point-of-care machines. You might recall that that they had their supplies they were supposed to receive were diverted to Florida, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. They're actually putting in a new PCR testing platform that I believe is a Fisher machine that uses non-proprietary testing supplies. One of the problems with testing supplies is that each type of machine generally has to use real specific proprietary, reagent or swabs. In this case, they've got one that they're going to be putting in October that will that would otherwise that would be able to use virtually any kind of reagent on the market. So, and I believe they'll be able to do something like 400 tests a day with that. That'll be in October. And then you might recall that Legacy recently had difficulty obtaining reagent, but I don't think I believe their supplies are adequate right now. But given the concerns that the providers have had about adequacy of testing supplies, they've limited they're not doing as much testing as they have done previously, and it's certainly going to be more difficult for people who are asymptomatic, for example, to get testing. The bottom line on this is that this is a national supply issue. You've got healthcare providers competing with each other, competing with the, we try to do as much ordering as we can centrally through CRESA, but you've got states competing with each other for testing supplies. And I don't know that, depending on what happens with the pandemic nationally, I'm not sure, I'm not sure this is going to get better. And I'm not sure, honestly, what leverage we have at the local level to get more supplies. Anyway, wanted to share that all with you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Further questions from the council? Councilor Maggie?
Yeah, if I could, I just want to add my comments. And so I don't disagree entirely with what Dr. Melnick said. Certainly this has been a frustration of mine since February. Because we had these emergency proclamations in place that some would consider pretty draconian, impacting every aspect of how we live today, from schools to churches to businesses. And yet on the other side of the coin, the reaction by local government, state government, and national government, from the very beginning, testing has been a centerpiece of problems and constraints in how we react to the pandemic. Yet we haven't taken any steps, locally or otherwise, to have a view of what the medical logistics challenges are, from the testing machines to the supplies that feed them. We have no visibility of that, and so there are no centralized decision processes in place. And I agree it's a national level issue in that, so, Singer Company, instead of making sewing machines, made M1 carbines. General Motors made Hellcat fighters. The National Defense Production Board mass-produced what we needed to respond to World War II. We don't have anything in place like that, and very tepid sticking of our toes into those waters to convert industry to whether it's a reagent or a pipette tip or a proprietary piece of equipment. And the good news, Dr. Melnick, that you mentioned was that at least one local provider is now looking towards a different machine that may have more generic supplies and more ready access to that. But I think it doesn't alleviate our responsibility in Clark County to do the best we can. So instead of relying on the individual supply chains of each of the care providers, it it would be a good investment, and whether we ask the national government to create an operations cell or reserves or the active army or public health at the national level to come in and say, we need to paint a logistics picture so that we know what the burn rate of these supplies are, so we can anticipate them. When they get into the yellow, we can know to order more. I think we're just lacking the responsibility to follow and try to resolve these supply issues. And certainly, most of this could be resolved at the state level. And I'm hopeful that we could resolve some of them at the local level, but we don't know because we don't know what the shortfalls are. You had made previously the point that protective equipment was a different supply chain, and so I'm separating that out. I'm just talking about the testing supplies, all the consumables that are involved in the different processes of testing. So we're missing the boat. The state's missing the boat, the federal government's missing the boat, and so it's good to discuss. What I had proposed was at least having a letter of concern to go to the state public health, maybe to our congressional leaders, because, you know, if this was over tomorrow, it would be a waste of time. But we don't know when this is going to be over, and it's already gone months beyond what I would have anticipated, especially with these orders that we're still in phase 2. You know, so this may be a longer haul than we think. I don't know. I guess Russia just came out with a vaccine that even Russian doctors are questioning. And I know there's going to be a lot of reluctance when our vaccine comes out because it was rushed through the system. Hopefully we don't rush it through the system. But so this is a long-standing issue. The medical logistics chain and visibility of it. We should put some energy into figuring out how to fix it. If we need outside help, let's ask for it. But quite frankly, in a major military operation, we get these briefings twice a day, not once a week, on where our supplies are presently, where they'll be tomorrow, where they'll be in 3 days, and anticipating shortfalls so out in the future, so decision makers can make good decisions on whether it is to restrict testing or start rationing it again and how that would happen. You know, those decisions are being made in a vacuum at this point. So those are the things.
One of the things I want to add is some of this is unpredictable. So, for example, back in April, Peace Health was supposed to get testing supplies, and they were diverted. They were on their way to Peace Health, and they were diverted to New York. You know, more recently, the Vancouver Clinic was supposed to get these rapid testing supplies, and they were diverted to Florida. So you can't even if we were to do, you know, like look at our supply right here, we can't. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen given the national state of affairs and given how these supplies move around nationally. That raises more, you know, creates a whole lot of uncertainty. I agree with you. This is incredibly frustrating. It's frustrating for those of us in public health. It's frustrating for the providers, and it's certainly frustrating for patients.
Other comments from council? I share your concern, Councilman Entergy. It seems to me to be a huge undertaking, actually, even to do the logistical suggestion that you made. I don't know how we would do that, but this has all been pretty frustrating, and it's dismaying to me that somebody could have symptoms and wait even 48 hours for the results of a test, since, you know, they're going to be, if they start quarantining the minute they think they have it, that's fine, but, you know, that has to be verified too, so,
It actually,
I don't know what to say, yeah.
that actually impedes our ability, not only, would they have to isolate themselves, but it really impedes our ability, to find out about a case, because they're not confirmed until the lab test is positive. And it has to be the right lab test, and then we do the case investigation. There's a turnaround time like, 7 or 8 days, that's been happening with the national labs. That's unacceptable. It's just, it impedes our ability to control the pandemic. I'm sorry, I cut you off there, but I'm agreeing.
Yeah, no, you didn't really cut me off. I was rambling. So, I don't know, I guess I don't have an answer to what was suggested by Councilman Entergy, and I guess we need to do the best we can with what we have. If it were possible to do some of this logistical stuff, to me, it doesn't seem like we could get it up and running that fast.
I'm actually, let me take down what my ask is. At a minimum, could we ask Dr. Melnick, in talking to his counterparts at the state, to request that either the active component, because there are whole units that do this medical logistics tracking, whole capacities within the military. I still to this day don't know what we're doing up in Camp Murray. I thought that's what that facility was for. They were going to have, they were going to pull in data from around the state and paint an operational picture from logistics to otherwise for medical care. So I don't know what they ended up doing up there, but that's a capacity that doesn't seem to exist anywhere in the state. The military, it's resident in the military. To run those, to gather data, to paint a picture, to show what's green, yellow, orange, and black as far as necessary consumables. It could be done. And so maybe Dr. Melnick could at least raise that with the state and see if they can hash it out and ask for assistance.
So, Councilman Entergy, we had a great discussion about this. Even if we were to do that, the states are competing with each other right now for supplies. And that wouldn't have stopped what happened with the Vancouver clinic when their supplies got diverted to Florida. I'm going to give you my 2 bits on this. We talked about this, but this is like being at war. We're at war with the pandemic right now, and we really need and I think you articulated it pretty well. To really deal with this, we need some sort of like a Manhattan Project, where we really get this taken care of on a national level. The states are competing with each other for supplies right now. So the reason that we got supplies to Florida is that Florida is more the epicenter of the pandemic right now. But until we do something and coordinate this nationally, I think I don't know what the state or the state can. And I've had these discussions with my state colleagues. I think. One suggestion I might make, and we talked about this, is for the council to maybe advocate through the National Association of Counties, maybe talk to our congressional delegation and see if they can make things happen at a much shorter level. Because right now it's kind of a free-for-all with the states competing with each other for supplies. I don't think we have much local leverage. I don't even think there's that much state leverage given the national situation.
So I would agree with that advocacy effort. That's kind of what I was alluding to before with letters to the right people. At a minimum, if Washington State took these actions and had it in black and white, documented what our issues were and what they would be in the weeks ahead, I think that would inform the decision makers, or help inform the decision makers at the national level. It would be harder to avoid black and white statistics and graphs that well document the posture that we're in. I know that we're competing nationally, and it's really unfortunate that we're still in this position after so many months.
You know, the best way to do this might be through WhatsApp also, because then you can get counties, you know, throughout the state to join in on this, and you know, make it. That might be more. I'm just thinking a more powerful statement if all the counties got together on this.
I think that probably is a good course. I think it's even better than an equal course, because we're most concerned about our locale and state, but even more concerned about Clark County. And so that may be a direction to go, and possibly something that should come up in our meetings that happen. I don't know, Gary, if you've signed into any of those meetings. So have you brought it up at those meetings, Gary?
Yeah, about 2 months ago.
Okay, well, maybe, yeah.
It's worse now than it was 2 months ago, because 2 months ago, you know, the cases were flat nationally. Now, you know, I've said this, you know, it's like deja vu. We're beginning to see what we saw in April. So it's much worse now than it was back. And that's a problem, because we've had months to think about this, and it has, you know, years that we would have put something together. But no, you know, it's just more facing what we faced in April, with even higher rates of activity.
Okay, I think that probably is the best course of action right now. If there's any help that you could lend to us with bullet points, et cetera, Dr. Melnick, that might be helpful too. You understand what it is we're trying to get at, and you know, you must have that pretty readily available to you. But anyway,
we can help with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the council on this subject? Okay, I thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. We'll move on to 2.3, Washougal School District DA. And
good morning, counselors. Can you hear me? Okay, great. The Washougal School District submitted an application for a non-project development agreement to the county, which was processed according to the county's code on development agreements, and that's in Title 40, it's at section 40.550.030. So that application was distributed to community planning, community development, and public works, and I believe also to community enforcement, and it was deemed complete. So 21 days after it was deemed complete, the departments that received and reviewed it presented their assessments, their preliminary assessments of the application to the county manager's office. And now, according to subsection H2 of the DA ordinance, the council is holding its public meeting to determine whether the county should go forward to negotiate the DA as according to its application, or whether to deny the DA at this point. So first of all, staff does not recommend that the county proceed to negotiate the DA because of a number of risks, legal risks that are associated with it. So the proposed DA would require the county for a period of 10 years to support bringing a particular property into the Washougal urban growth boundary. And that has a number of legal implications as the county is very aware of, and as council is very aware of, having just gotten out of the appeal of urban growth boundary expansions that occurred in 2016. So, having said that, I believe that Oliver Orgiaco from Community Planning, the Community Planning Director, should be present also. If the council has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Are there questions of the council? Councilman.
Yeah, if I remember, this is kind of an island as well. I think there are, in addition to the UGB question, this doesn't abut the current UGB. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, Councilor, that's my understanding. And one of the questions about this is, so what other properties would be involved? We don't know what other properties would be involved, and that is one of the reasons why staff believes it's premature to commit future councils for a period of 10 years to say yes to this.
Yeah, I think to me, I mean, there's a process to bring properties into urban growth boundaries, and a DA does not seem the process to do that to me, given the constraints of the Growth Management Act and the challenges certainly that we've had in the past over UGB expansions. And so I think, well, there's a process for this, and I don't think a DA is the appropriate process. So that would just be my comment there. Thank you.
For council?
I agree with that. I don't have questions about it, but I would agree that this doesn't seem like the right process for this discussion.
Did Oliver have anything to say prior to us?
Oliver's actually not on at this time.
Oh, all right, okay.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'll just add.
Yeah.
So I concur with the legal analysis and concerns. I mean, we're going to buy ourselves a lawsuit. We're basically giving something away without compensation. It is an island, as just mentioned. It really moves and deviates from the Growth Management Act as far as how we approach urban growth boundaries. I think there's a lot of poor fits in this, and we're just going to get sideways with the board again and probably face lawsuits if we were to pursue this in this way.
Hey, are we going to, are we to take actual official action today?
Yes, Council, there are two options in the code, and one option is to direct staff to direct the county manager to continue to negotiate the DA, and the other option is to deny the DA at this point. I should also mention that by a change to legislation this past year, it is possible for school districts to develop schools outside the urban growth boundary. So having a property within the EGB is not necessary for that action on the part of the school district. But would be appropriate at this point.
Yes. Okay. So I would, if there is no further discussion and there are no further questions, although I do see Councilor Blum, I see your mic is off. It's on now.
I was going to make a motion to deny the school district DA application.
Okay, I will accept that as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to deny the DA at this point, and is there further discussion? Hearing all, or is this voice?
Yes.
Let's do a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Thanks for your time, Chris. Moving on then to the next item under new business, the Transportation Improvement Program discussion.
Good morning, Council. This is Martinez, Public Works Director, County Engineer. I'll go ahead and start that, and then we have Susan Wilson and also Rob Fluke. They'll give you more information. Now, we typically do a number of workshops and present that to you, but because of COVID and restrictions, we haven't been able to. We're not going to give a full presentation. That's it, but we're going to come back to a public process. But we want to give you a couple of things that we've done a little differently than last year. But first of all, I think we have one of the probably best documents compared to other jurisdictions in terms of transportation improvement plan. It's a really great document that helps us to get grants and really outline to our residents what is the county going to be doing next 6 years and how we plan it in terms of construction activities, grants, and prioritizing our projects. It's a really great document. And actually, we're going to be using this process to develop capital improvement for our parks and also for our clean water. So we're going to be using the same process, and next year you're going to see that presentation about those other divisions as well. A couple of things that we have done a little differently than last year. And one thing that we've done, and we're really glad to have our new finance manager. She has really helped us to, because we were doing a lot of projections and our actuals, and we have a little bit of discrepancy or a little gap. And she has done a much better job to bring that a little bit closer, so we have a better understanding of our projections, our funds, especially road funds, to fund a lot of these projects. And we prioritize this first, and then develop our budget for the rest of the department. Because we make commitments to our granting agency and also council and the residents that we're going to be pushing these projects forward. So we want to make sure that we stay true to that. And then also, in terms of prioritizing some of this project. That's basically the introduction what I had, and I'm going to turn it over to Rob and Susan to add more on some of the stuff that you're going to be seeing when we do the go to workshop and public process for tip approval.
Okay.
Great, thank you very much to Susan Wilson, Programming Manager, Clark County Public Works. Do you mind if I share one slide of the PowerPoint presentation that I'll present next week?
No, please do.
Okay, it looks like I locked from sharing files. Is that?
We're giving you permissions. Just give us.
Oh, thank you so much.
She can try now.
You should have the ability to share now.
Okay. I'm not. Okay, looks like I have to open the file. It's open on my screen, but let me see if I can. Okay. Give me a minute, please.
She's host right now, so she should be. That's all. You can't do anything to it. If she wants to email it to Rebecca's email. We can pull it
And
up.
Susan, if you have issues, if you can just email that to Rebecca's email, we can pull it up as well.
But she has to give back.
Okay, I think I have it. I just have to navigate to my drive, and I have to reopen the file. So, August presentation. Okay, let's see if this works for us. It's a little bit different than what I'm used to, so. Yeah, it's not from, oh wait, there it goes. Okay.
No, she has to give back post
It's a
back to
pretty
her.
large file, so. Anyhow, I'll wait for that starts loading, but just a reminder to council, The Secure Transportation Improvement Program is a state mandated document adopted by council before the budget's adopted. This year we want to adopt a $203 million program and a $27 million annual construction program. And most of the projects you guys are already familiar with. 99th Street, we're going to go ahead and construct a roundabout corridor. I actually will be showing you a video at next week's TIP work session. And then also the 179th Street project will be also on the 6-year transportation improvement program. It's not coming up, Kathleen, so I think I'll share those slides next week with council, and then also I'll share a video of a roundabout corridor, and then I'll talk more in depth about some of the revenues, some of the finances, some of the estimates we are receiving. Another thing I do want to mention to council is we are on the list to receive another $5 million in federal grants, about $2 million additional to support the 99th Street roundabout. In addition, about $2 million for 179th Street, the roundabout at 29th and 50th. We are in full design there. And then we're slated to receive another $500,000 for some design effort on 152nd between 99th and Patton, and then a traffic signal project in the Orchard Consistent area, about $750,000 there. So we've had a very successful year. Another thing I do want to note is we applied for a grant to support design efforts and some construction efforts on 500 and 182nd, and we were not successful with that grant, but we are still continuing to work with the state to get that project funded. So I know they are also applying for some safety money. That's all I have. I'm unable to bring the presentation up, but like I said, next week I'll present all the details to you.
Hey, did Rob have anything to add?
Well, I could babble on about something. Susan did a really good job of describing what we're doing. I won't presume to take your time. If you have any questions about any of the projects, I'm happy to answer them. But Susan did a really good job of setting the stage.
Okay, thank you. Other questions of the council? Okay, we look forward to the presentation on Tuesday.
And Susan, if I may, if you could please right-click on Rebecca and give the host permission, that would be great. Thank you.
Kathleen, are we waiting to actually show this graphic?
No, I think you're good to go to move forward in the agenda.
Okay, all right. The next item then thank you all for that presentation. Our next item is the Transportation Summit. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is to see or invite one more council member to this. It's not going to be a big public thing, but Identity Clark County is holding this summit. And is it, Kathleen, is it the 26th?
It's August 26th from 1 to 3.
Are there counselors, one other counselor that would like to participate in this?
Yes, Madam Chair. I volunteered by email previously, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that okay with the other members? I don't see any objections. If there are no objections, then we'll ask Councilor Entergy to join that summit. I'm planning on attending as well, as I did in previous summits there at ICC. So, Okay, moving on then to the next item, which is the TIF. We have Dan, Ahmed, and Bill Richardson. Are you going to start, Ahmed?
Yes, I can. Council,
Okay.
appreciate that. I think I'll let Bill after that. As you probably know, there is one project that we've been working in. We do have a draft developer agreement with one of the developers, and we have talked about this before on, this is the intersection of 78th Street and 39. And this was, previously there was a number of developer agreements that would expire, so there was a lot of confusion what needs to happen. So when the project, the apartment complex came and we wanted to work with them in terms of what needs to be done at that intersection. So collaboratively work with them a way of building a signal there that will benefit Luke Jensen Park. Because previously as part of that project, there were some conditions placed in terms of monitoring that intersection, and if there was some warrants or met or something we need to do, or maybe lessen the activities at the park if there was additional mitigation needed. And also at the development to the south, there's going to be a public street that's going to be built as part of this apartment complex, and also that will benefit the property to the east of it, that's a commercial development too. Eventually, sometime in our lifetime or someday in the future, that will be extended to connect to St. John. So there will be some public benefit for in terms of circulation of traffic, especially as the traffic increases on 78th Street, and also the commercial development and also residential development. So what I did that for my concern or the benefit that I was seeing was for Luke Jensen, because it's the primary sport complex for the area. It's regionally significant for making sure that we have safe access to that area with traffic signal instead of the condition we have right now, because the traffic on 78 are increasing. And we have talked about different possibilities of cost contribution to that area. We had a discount draft that made it split in that 3 ways. And one thing that we could do is pay the developer or the contractor through either pay for some type of credit. At this point, I know we had talked to council before trying to establish some kind of park impact fee credit process, and it's taking us a little bit longer, and I take responsibility for that one because I didn't realize it was going to take a lot longer, and we've been working with Peter's office and getting some direction from them too. So we do have a developer who likes to build a signal, and they are getting ready to have their building permit, and they have they know how much they have to pay for this park impact fee. I think it's about $922,000. So one thing we wanted to ask if the council would be open to defer the park impact fee for the amount of $180,000 until we finalize the different options that are available in terms of getting credit. So that way the applicant can move forward with the project because they have done some work, and then we'll come back and get a systematic approach on how we're going to approach this kind of project request that has a greater benefit to the county and our residents in terms of improvements such that. So that's, I'm going to open that, and I'll just turn it over to Bill and anybody else who, and also Rob might have some comments. So with that, I'll just open it up for Bill.
Bill, do you want to go ahead before I ask for comments?
No, I think probably what I'm here to do is answer some of the council's questions.
Okay, all right. Okay, so are there questions of the council? I would just say, just preliminarily, I do recall that we were trying to work out something where we could get a fifth reward or whatever you want to call it. Credit, right? So, sorry. And apparently it has taken longer than we thought because we have talked about that before. I think that this, in my opinion, this greatly adds to the Luke Jensen, this track which will add to Luke Jensen Park. So I think it is certainly should be considered something that is enhancing the park, although I know that there is, you know, a hesitation because it's not on the capital plan.
So
But,
if I can make comments in regard to that. So
Sure.
as all of you know, we have state statute regarding impact fees, and we've basically built our own impact fee provisions into our code. And we have the state and the code specifically call out two impact fees that are relevant here. One is a traffic impact fee and one is a park impact fee. The system you're talking about, Chair, is a park impact fee credit system, which would likely be modeled somewhat similar to the traffic impact fee credit system that we currently have in place. The problem is we don't have a credit system in place, and I believe one of the difficulties that I understand with building that system is that it is a fairly robust system. As you may know, and as Public Works can comment, the traffic impact fee system and credit system is fairly robust. It requires a look, a long-term 6-year to 20-year look at the traffic projects that are present in the county and what the county is wanting to spend money on, along with prioritization of those specific projects, such that we're knocking the most important projects off the list first with the funds that we have available. And that system is in place. And so as you probably know, when a developer develops and they're going to be impacting some traffic district or region, they don't get traffic impact fee credits unless what they're building is on the county facilities plan, which again is that plan that prioritizes some of the more significant projects. If we had, which we don't, if we had a park component to that capital facilities plan, then there would be a large list of park projects or activities that were prioritized. And if a developer was building out something that was on that list, then it's possible they could get credits. But again, that system is not in place currently. And I'm not sure that there was ever any direction to build that system, although I would let the parties in the know discuss that more, because I don't know that for certain. But that's why there's difficulty with the concept of park impact fees at this time, because there's no system in place.
okay, are there, I hear you, there's a system in place. I would, are there other comments or questions of the council? And
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I might.
yeah, Councilor Austin.
Can I get some clarification? So the agenda item says TIF and TIF, and we're talking TIF. So are you asking that so it sounds like, just let me get some clarification. Are you saying that we cannot do TIF credits on this, at all on this, because it's not on the capital facilities plan, and that you're recommending that we defer PIF until we get to something later? I'm trying to just clarify so I can ask the right kind of questions here.
So what I was commenting on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, I think what I was asking, if we could defer payment of about $180,000 of FIP, which is park impact fee, until we kind of finalize go through that, because there's a couple other stuff we need to work at. One, just like we have TIF credits are given if the facility is on our list. For example, when we're working with the Skyview project, then we can offer TIF credit. But this project is not listed on our capital facility because if the benefit regional or not. But those are the things that we're going to come back and work to see if it's appropriate, either park impact fee credit or TIF. So that's why we're asking for a little bit more time. But at the same time, we don't want to hold the applicant. So if we ask for, if council agrees to defer about $180,000 of park impact fee, that will allow us time to work on what we need to do. But at the same time, the applicant continue to work on their project and building that and pay the balance of what he owes us on the park impact fee.
Okay, all right, so thank you for that. So my one question is, how do we get this project going? And so it sounds like you answered that question. So if we agree then that we can defer the park impact fees for now, $180,000 worth, we can get this project going. And then we can, at that point in the future, look at how we build a PIF program, or if the TIF, or we find some way to make this work. And so that's the question that for me, yes, let's find a way to make this work. This is a really nice opportunity for a public-private partnership for an intersection of light that will serve both us, the county and the park, and the folks that are going to be living there. So I would support doing what we can as quickly as we can to move this forward.
So there is a section of code that deals with deferral of impact fees. The interesting part about this conversation is that that section of code is read in the context of there being a traffic impact fee credit system, but there not being a park impact fee credit system. So one of the questions that would need to be answered before we did that is, would this deferral system apply to park impact fees? Because the deferral system does not apply to all impact fees. It's actually limited to a very specific set of circumstances, which I believe is residential housing and attached residential housing. We have not looked into whether that would apply to a park impact fee credit system, again, because there is no park impact fee credit system at this time.
So I guess my comment would be that the council has a lot of purview, I believe, here. And I guess my question would be, how do we get from here to there? Whether it's this deferral process or whether it's an amendment to a DA or whatever that is, I don't know. But I think the council has a lot of purview here, so I'm just hoping we can get to the finish line on this.
So, Councilor, if I may, this is Ron. The DA doesn't exist at this time. The existing DA sunsetted, and we're coming back with the request for a new DA with slightly different conditions than what were in the original DA. So we've really limited and put a circle around what the improvements are that we're being asked to be a participant in, and put some other requirements on it to limit our exposure and still get to the end result. Our goal is to find a way to work with the private parties to make this happen. We just have to find a way that is going to allow for the strings attached to each of the funds to be able to be that participant and not have a problem.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, thank you. My concern would be that this does not drag on. That's the issue. We're in a time situation here. We have a building window that we're trying to meet. And I think we've been kind of in this process for a while. So I guess, again, I'll just ask the question, how do we get to the finish line sooner rather than?
Was it deferring the 180K in, would it be on the traffic impact fees then rather than park impact fees? Or could we defer the park impact fees? That is the fee we're deferring, but could it fall under can I answer this? Would it fall under PIF or TIF?
This may fall under the potentials. What we're trying to do is we're trying to be able to move forward to delay, defer the part of the park impact fee, and then find the proper funds to resolve that.
Sounds good. I'd like to do that. So we got two. Are there other questions?
I have a question.
Councilman.
What is involved in that deferral? Can you talk through what the paperwork and what the requirements are for that?
Well, they have to apply for the deferral. There's an application process. And again, the ability to get that deferral is very limited. And so I've never filled out the application paperwork myself, but I would assume it would cover that type of material. And it have to be reviewed by the county to determine if they qualified for the deferral. And that's the process.
So, are we signing a new DA?
There will be a new DA coming to you. And the question is, how do we resolve all of the questions, including potentially this, as part of that DA?
Can I answer your question, Councilman?
asking is for the council to defer $180,000 of park impact fees while working on an approach to find $180,000 because we don't know if we can use park impact fees for this cost. That was the question. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. I think right now, I think what we have the discussion been, and also the discussion we have in council, to find a way that we can establish park impact fee credit, because it could be utilized in the future. That's our first approach. Since we're going to work on park impact fee credit, so that's what we're asking, maybe ask the council if they can defer the $80,000 worth of park impact fee. It just pays the balance of it until we figure out how we're going to push that $80,000. It could be park impact fee or it could be traffic impact fee that will come back later on and we'll pay for it. But at this point, I think the low-hanging fruit from my perspective is deferring the park impact fee, $180,000, and then come back and so go through the process of that developer agreement and other ways that we can find the credit process for your approval, and then we can apply it appropriately.
So in some of the one-on-ones, we talked about whether or not park impact fees could be used for this. And while I absolutely believe that we need this traffic signal there, I'm concerned about using park impact fees for a traffic project, given how much we have to fund in parks. I'm concerned about starting the precedent of using park impact fees for traffic projects. Bill, could you talk a bit about if we can use, like, what's the precedent on something like this?
So I definitely.
Actually, let me just, Bill said, I didn't start to interject, but let me answer the reason we're asking for park impact fee. So the whole Luke Jensen project was built under using park impact fee and other funds. One of the conditions on the project was for us to monitor the intersection. When there's traffic increases, that find out that there needs to be mitigation done at that intersection. But there was some conditions tied to that. And if there was time, like for example, something very expensive like signal done, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, that we have to scale back some of the activity back from the parks in order to do that. And I don't think that's something that we're going to go that direction. But anything that relates to that intersection was, I think, tied, my understanding is tied to that Luke Jensen project. So this traffic signal actually is going to benefit Luke Jensen and these other properties, because it's not really, when you put a signal on the roadway or a fish principal arterial is supposed to carry a lot of traffic, it doesn't really help the corridor. It really helps the adjacent property owners so they can have safe access because of the volume they're generating. So that, from that perspective, my initial approach was using this park impact fee, but we're going to evaluate and come back. So that's part the reason I think the park impact fee is appropriate to mitigate and participate for that signal. I don't know if this was a reasonably significant project would have been added as part of capital facilities plan. So that could have been accommodated using traffic impact fee or other means to build a signal.
So,
Okay, and Bill, we're totally going to let you talk. I do actually still want an answer to that question. Could you please provide the documentation for that? You mentioned that in a couple of meetings, and I would just love to see the language around that from the agreement with Jensen. Sorry, Bill.
I can provide that. This is Rob. I'd like to add on one thing to what Ahmad said. The conditions for the park, Luke Jensen Park, were we were going to be monitoring the traffic associated with the park itself, the use of the park, and if thresholds were met, one of the possibilities was to actually reduce the use of the park through some administrative method, which has one set of problems associated with it because people want to be able to use the park and it's reasonable. The other possibility would be that the park, somehow the county would build a median in front of the entrance on Luke Jensen Park to prohibit less and less in. So we would still have to put an investment into the road structure to meet that part of the requirement. And orders of magnitude for putting median in with all the ancillary requirements for current medians for street lighting, et cetera, are going to be on the order of a similar cost to what our share in this traffic signal are. And with the traffic signal, we have better operations for the cars, we have better operations for the pedestrians, and it provides better access to the median, prohibited left in, left out. So that's kind of the thought process behind it.
Thank you. I'd love to see that.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm sorry, just to make sure, the document is very long. Do you want a clip of the requirements, or do you want the entire document from stem to start?
I think just the clip of the requirements would be great. Thank you.
I'll get that to you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to send that to all the council members, or just to Council Chair?
If other councilors have that documentation, it might be a good idea just to send it to all of us, since you're picking it up and going to send it. You might as well add all the names.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And Bill, do you have anything further to say?
Yes, there's actually two issues that have been brought up that I think I need to comment on. The first was Councilor Lentz's.
Okay.
And with regard to whether there's precedent on what constitutes park, what constitutes non-park when it comes to these impact fees. I know that is an issue that has come up numerous times, or has come up throughout the discussions when we've talked about park impact fees and what activities might qualify for them. I think what the council will have to consider is if a project like this, a signalization on a main thoroughfare, was to somehow qualify for park impact fees when the park impact fee credit system was put into place, how would the council justify that with a process already in place regarding traffic impact fees that deals with signalization and improvements in the right-of-way? And I'm not questioning whether you can or you cannot do that. I think that's something that would need to be addressed to show that there's a reason for two processes. There's a park impact fee process, there's a traffic impact fee process. They differ in some regard, and this signal fits into the park impact fee system because of this certain aspect about it. So there is no precedent as to what constitutes an activity that would qualify for park impact fee credits, because again, there is no park impact fee credit system in place. And so that's, I think that's as far as I can go with regards to answering your question, Councilor Lentz. But there's also was the question about deferral. And I think it's important to understand that when I say that deferral is limited, maybe I'm not making very clear how limited it is. It has a limited time period, it's 18 months. So if this was to be deferred, it would have to be, the tops that could be deferred was 18 months, and we would have to have a park impact fee credit system in place if the council was looking to go down that road with park impact fee credits within that 18 months, and actually have it in place to the extent that we could use it prior to that 18 months passing. But beyond that, the deferral system doesn't mention specifically traffic impact fees or park impact fees. It just mentions impact fees, but it is limited to, I think I'm looking at the code right now, it's limited to something like 20 parcels on a divided up piece of property for single family dwellings. It says the number of lots eligible for deferral is limited to 20 at any given time per applicant, which I believe contemplates the idea of like a subdivision where you have individual lots for each house. I don't believe that would apply in this case, because I believe the proposed development is, I guess, apartments or something like that. And then it says to defer the payments. It says that for purposes of this code, the attached single family shall be limited to common wall housing with no more than 1 unit per legal lot. So I'm concerned that this development would not fall within the gamut of developments that actually benefit or are subject to this deferral program. And I'm specifically talking about Clark County Code 4610-045. So it would need to be a really hard look at that deferral program to see if this development fit into it before, for the council to make an educated decision on whether or not to defer these impact fees. And if they felt as if it fell within those provisions, then again, it would be limited by the amount of time and probably the amount of units that would be susceptible to the deferral. And I don't know if the impact fee may be per unit. I don't know if that would get it to the $180,000 level, but that's something that council would need to look at too.
Requiring, if I may, is this Kathleen?
Yeah.
I would, while I agree, I want to, help development move forward and help our constituents, but I also, more importantly, want to make sure that the council has all the information to make the right decision right now with regards to how we're moving forward. Legally, I want you to know what are the risks involved if you choose to do a PIF versus a TIF. And also, because this is not on the capital facilities plan, I also want to be transparent as to if funding is going to be taken away from other things on that plan that may take away from those projects, you need to know those impacts as well. So from the conversation that I'm hearing today, as well as the previous conversations I had with some of our staff, which is a little different than what I'm hearing today, I would be more comfortable if we came back to you with a thorough analysis on this. Hopefully staff can work on this and have it done we can have it sent to you by end of the week and discuss it next week, because I am a little uncomfortable with the different approach than what was expressed to me by our legal and staff. So we need to get on the same page to make sure we're not missing something that could have an issue later.
Okay, so I think we will take the county manager's advice and move this forward. I'm hoping that this can be done relatively speedily.
It will be. It will be, yes,
okay.
because
Right.
like I said, I had shared with council during one-on-ones what was shared with me, which is the staff did not see a path forward for park impact fee credits because it needs to be on the CFP plan, and as Bill mentioned, there is no process in place. And secondly, the more direct path was to lower the TIF in a DA, which would leave the capital facilities plan short $180,000, and there's abilities to make up that money, which would be through REIT, public funds, or the road funds. So there was a clear direction given to me of options that the council could consider on how to move forward, and it hasn't been presented the same way that it was presented to me. So I do think that there is a very quick resolution to this. Either move forward that way, or we'll have something to you by the end of the week.
Okay. So would we need to meet then at the end of the week regarding this, or could this be on?
I think I do think an option, and legal can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think an option for you is that you could, if you want to move forward with PIF credits and deferral, and the majority wants to do that contingent that it meets the legal requirements, you can certainly do that today, and then we can take that direction, and then we can still share any potential impacts that this may have.
Yeah, okay, I think that's good. If we have agreement that we could at least start moving forward with a deferral, we have the number of counselors necessary for that, then we can move forward with that. And actually, if the documentation that we receive is not consistent with what we have decided, or what we're not willing to do, then I guess we could pull back. Or can we? I mean, I guess that's the question. Are you willing to take the risk? Councilman Medici, your mic is off.
Yeah, so I didn't want to interrupt anyone at any point. Based on the last one-on-one, the biggest concern was what can we do legally? And I'm really hearing that we haven't really made much progress in that regard. You know, I'm hard pressed to understand why a traffic light that's integral to the safety of a park, and we have the same situation at 13th and Harmony, although other things are moving on that park. You know, it seems to me we don't want to charge or impact our developers twice. We need concurrency, and in this park particularly, we have a high-volume street that would put families and children in jeopardy. A median will not be a great solution there. So I think we need to get to this, what's legal and what's not. We do need to move this forward. I agree with Councilor Olson that we need to move this forward. I also need to agree with Councilor Luntz. We don't want to constrain the park impacts fees to such a point where negatively impacts the ability to maintain our parks. So I'm hearing a lot of ambiguity that I did not hear during the one-on-one. So I concur with Kathleen. We need a pause. We need a relook, but we need to move this forward. So I would like to hear about this again in a one-on-one, but does that totally miss the construction window by delaying a week, if you will, to our next Wednesday work time? Is that going to close out the ability of the developer to move forward? Because I don't want to do that either. I mean, maybe we can meet sooner than that.
Well, to try and clarify some of the legal position that I believe was discussed in one-on-ones, and this word deferral is being thrown around a little bit looser than I think it probably should. Deferral, the term I'm using is a term of art that's within the code, and the legal opinion is that deferral is not available in this case. But I don't think that that's what we're talking about in regards to this project. Specifically because I think what we're talking about is taking the total amount of calculated impact fees and trying to find a way to have a county contribution to that. And that is what was discussed, and that would be done through a DA where there would be a value exchange for the county's contribution to the signalization, but it would not be a deferral of impact fees as is stated in the code. Instead, it would be a discount of these. The proposal was to discount the impact fees through a DA in exchange for the signalization, and that we would have to find that money in some funding source down the road. Again, it's not a deferral because a deferral means they're going to pay it at some point in the near future, and that's not going to happen. And again, the legal opinion is that's not available through code. It's just the deferral. Our code sections that discuss deferral simply don't contemplate the type of development that is the subject of this discussion.
So I would look forward to hearing Kathleen's sort of assessment at the end of the week, and then maybe we can decide what our next step would be if we need to try to meet before next Wednesday or try to make a decision. But I think if there's a placeholder with regard to some sort of impact fee credit rather than deferral, I don't know what we're going to call it, but a path forward to where we want a placeholder, that we're in agreement that we want to do something there, but that we hear from Kathleen by the end of the week on what our legal opportunity, not hurdles, but what the legal circumstances look like in order what's truly the best path forward.
Okay, and then I guess my concern is how will the decision, do we want to take advice on one-on-ones? Do we want to get back together and make this decision together? That would mean that it would either be next week, on Tuesday perhaps, or on, whether it's on the one-on-ones, and we're asked to either give a stance or deny. What's the council's pleasure, and I don't, what would be the legal/correct way of handling this. I don't know who would, Kathleen, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, if you want to make a motion contingent on certain things, you can now. We can certainly add it to Tuesday's meeting. I had clear understanding from legal what the perspective was, but what was presented was a little contrary to that. So that it's just, you know, if we can find a way to move forward, and I will forward you the information that I shared with you on Monday. But any decision from the council will have to be made public, so you can do that under contingent today, or we can add it to Tuesday's council meeting as well.
And I guess I don't know what the contingency is.
Right, so if the council wants to move forward with deferring PIF credits and using PIF to fund this, and legally we can do this, and if the majority of the council wants to move forward that way, you can say we want to move forward with deferring the PIF through a DA and staff to start negotiating, contingent that legal agrees in their legal analysis that this is a viable option. So that's the contingent part.
Okay, all right. I would accept a motion to that effect then, if there is one.
So I have another story. I support that. Okay, it seems to me we're gonna end up with PIF credits instead of PIF because we can't find a way to get PIF, and we should have just stayed with the original report that we all got in one-on-ones, and we're not there, we're kind of confused right now, so here we are.
Some of them. Basically, I think what we're being asked to do is to move forward. We have to take the position that we're willing to take this 183,000 hit somewhat. And so I would be inclined to support that because I think the park needs the traffic signal and the development needs to move forward.
So that's a second?
Yeah.
So that's a second? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to what the county manager said and Julie moved and Councilor Edmonds seconded. Is there further discussion? And I did take note of your comment, Councilor Edmonds, in your second. Councilor Blunt?
This will be an awkward vote for me because I'm fully supportive of finding a way to get this $180,000, but I'm so frustrated with the presentation over the last 20 minutes. This has become so convoluted that I just can't confidently say that yes, I support what's being presented because I feel like we're hearing one thing from Public Works and then from legal saying, well, no, we probably can't do that. So I would love to hear on this next week and make a vote on it then, and hopefully a vote of support. I think just one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is we've talked about the safety on 78th Street, just a half mile down the road coming out of Kingsway. This also plays a role in that, so I think we should be looking at whether this corridor should be on the capital improvement plan anyway, capital facilities plan anyway. So I'm supportive of finding a way to do this. I think it's the right thing to do, but I'm not comfortable supporting this process because it just feels so muddy and murky, and there's just a lack of transparency that I'm frustrated with. So I support doing this next week, but I wouldn't want to approve today.
Other discussion?
Before Councilor Blunt spoke, I was going to ask if somebody could please restate the motion because I'm confused about even what we're voting on. I think this is important. I think we need a signal there. I think we should find the funds, but I'm not confident about any of this discussion at this point. So I look forward to getting more information. And to echo the position that I think I heard from Councilor Blum, hopefully have a supportive vote for whatever we decide to do. But right now, I feel like it's all over the place. Thank you.
Yes, I would contend that it is a bit murky, and this vote is contingent upon clearing up that murkiness. I would state too that we do have problems on 78th Street. This signal will park and pedestrian safety. I know that Harmony Park probably included some transportation issues with it, and I don't see including transportation issues with park fees, impact fees as a problem, but, you know, I'm not the legal person. I see this in a practical way, that it basically is benefiting the park greatly having this signal. And not only that, it's benefiting that corridor by having this signal. So with that, I will support this contingent, this motion contingent upon the information that is brought before us to clear up where we get this $180,000 and where it's going to fall.
Madam Chair, if I might. So I completely agree with both Councilors Blum and Lunt on this, and I am extraordinarily frustrated with where we are right now. So I'll just restate the motion for the purpose of just moving forward and getting this over with. That I'm moving that we approve PIF deferral contingent upon legal analysis, and hopefully we hear something from Kathleen by Friday about if this doesn't work, what the next proper and legal process would be to deal with this opportunity to whatever. So that's the motion, just to clarify it at the end. But yeah, this has been an agonizingly painful conversation, so I'd rather we just get it over with.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Okay, motion passes. Moving to the council reports. Are there any council reports today?
Madam Chair, so
Mr. Manager.
I'm going to have to basically leave of court to bring this up. And so what I want to say is when we talk about the proposed rules for the session 2, you know, when I first read it, I read it correctly. When I just pulled it up during all this agonizing discussion on the park. But so the problem I had, and I had emailed it to you earlier, and I know you referenced it, you know, where paragraph 5 says that people will refrain from certain conduct, B creates an exception to that caveat, and one of those caveats is commenting on a position. So that opens the door to divisive comments. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, especially in light of our interesting comment on earlier in the discussion. So I had asked to strike those words on a position, which it could also mean your First Amendment rights to have an opinion. But it's not action that would fit within the definition that the group is using for systemic racism. So, you know, I just want to raise that again because I think it's a gaping hole that's going to cause a problem. But I'm hoping it doesn't. So I'm not sure if you want to revisit that or just forget it. Let's just see what happens tonight and hope for the best.
Other councilors want to weigh in? No. So I guess we'll have the door open for this. So that's how I see it too. That it's commenting on a position, not an action, or even inaction. So at any rate, I appreciate your noticing that, Councilman Energy, and I appreciate your concern. And but we don't have the rest of the councilors online. Perhaps if it were directed at them, we might. But
okay, I'll make a quick comment on this then, since we threw it out there. you know, that's what people comment about. It's, so don't comment about, you know, kind of car I drive or whatever, but about the positions we take as counselors, about the actions we take as counselors, that's what people comment on. Those aren't personal, those are the things we do in our public role. So I don't see an issue per se with that. I mean, certainly people can get heated and they can get nasty, and I hope that doesn't happen, but commenting on something personal versus a position or action you've taken as a public official, I think that's fair. I think that's what that's how we're judged by our constituents. That's how we're in campaigns. People talk about the positions we've taken on issues and the things we've said and the actions we've taken. So whether it was me that felt targeted, I would have the same position. That this is our role, and people have the ability to comment on the positions we take and the actions we take. So I hope it's a cordial evening tonight. I'm looking forward to it being.
I hope it is too, and I understand what you're saying. Certainly, if they are just statements and not pejorative or demeaning, anybody can take it. So any public official can and should be able to do that. We don't need to be cursed at, and I didn't come to represent the people to be cursed at or called names. So that said, I'm hoping we do have our moderator, and I trust that she is going to moderate this meeting in a good way. So, moving on, other council reports?
Yes, I had something I wanted to bring forward, and I emailed the council just before the meeting. I saw, Councilor McAgee, you had a problem with the document, but Kathleen, I sent it to you and Tina, and I'm hoping maybe you guys could bring it up, or if I need to send it to somebody else. The State Association of Counties, okay, sweet. You'll tell me if you need me to send it to somebody else. The State Association of Counties did a resolution honoring Washington State's local public health officials for work during the COVID-19 pandemic. And they sent it around, and they're asking local jurisdictions to consider creating their own resolution for this. So what I sent around and what we'll bring up is the sample resolution that they wrote for a statewide resolution. And I'd like this council to consider doing a local resolution for our hardworking public health officials during this COVID crisis. They've been working long hours with changing circumstances, and I think that it would be a nice show of support. We've seen locally and nationwide that our unelected public servants are taking a lot of heat and having to do a lot of work on this, and I think it would be a nice effort to show support for the hard work they're doing. And my request would be that we have staff work up a local version of this resolution for us to then see before next week's meeting and or take a vote on it.
Councilor Lenz, I'd like, when we have council reports, what I really would prefer is that we bring up resolutions that we want to move forward with, which is a fine resolution, but I would rather they be on the agenda and not in council reports, if we could. I think that's the best way to handle it. This is another action item, it sounds to me like, and so I would prefer that you request not 2 minutes before the meeting begins to state that you're going to bring something up in councilor reports that requires a decision. I have no problem doing that. I just see another action that was similar to something taken before. So I prefer just from now on that during these meetings, if you want an action item from the rest of the councilors, that it be on the agenda, not in councilor reports.
If the rest of the council agrees to that, I'd be fine with it, and would hope that the entire council would do that as well. With regard to the resolution that's in front of us, again, because you started speaking kind of right before I was done. What I'm asking the council to do is consider asking staff to create a local version of this resolution that we would then fully discuss and vote on next week.
I would support a local version, and whether we can get it done by next week, I don't know if there's any potential issue in having it, if we can't get it done next week, whether we get it done in the next council meeting, I don't know, but I would support doing something like this in a local version.
Yeah, I would consider it, and I just want to clarify that when it was sent to us, I tried to download it, and my computer, my county computer, just recorded it as correct and wouldn't allow me to read it. So it wasn't that I was objecting to it, it's just that I couldn't see it at all. So if we had a local version to look at and consider, I'd be in favor of that as well.
I would agree. I would be happy to see a local version of it, talk about it next week. My only comment would maybe be, I'd be interested in just looking at adding a whereas or possibly doing a separate resolution, because we also have our private healthcare workers that are doing a lot as well, and I feel like they deserve our appreciation being shown to them as well. And so whether that's somewhere here, whether we talk about doing something else in the future for them, I think it's the entire healthcare system that has stepped up and gone above and beyond. And while I absolutely want to give recognition to our public healthcare folks, I also want to recognize we have a lot of people in the private sector too that are also doing it. So without raising one or the other or saying, but of trying to be inclusive, that everyone has really gone through challenging times as we've dealt with this. So whatever the best way to move forward.
Yeah, well said, Councilor Blum, I agree with that. I do think that, our hospitals and our workers in our hospitals, all of those people, I think, should be involved. And of course, the responsibility that, of all the decisions that have to come out of our public health as well. But, so we do have a majority of the council that would like to have staff work a local version up, whether it's next week or whenever they're able to find the time to do this for us and get it back to us so we can see what that local version looks like. Other council reports?
Just a couple, just quick ones. So I noticed the Parks Advisory Board meeting agenda this week. There was the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan that was on the agenda. And in the context of this PIP credit discussion that we've been having and that we frankly had a year ago, and I do recall having some direction with regards to trying to establish a fairly simple and straightforward PIP credit process. But I'm wondering if that is part of the pros update, and if at some point in the future we could maybe get this back on the agenda, and then also get an update in terms of what the advisory board is looking at with regard to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, if the council is would concur with getting an update on that. That's one. And the other one is just is ministerial, and I don't know how the rest of you guys, this morning I tried to log in, and I logged into the next week's council time. So Rebecca, and maybe nobody else has this problem, I wondered if we can get the links not quite so far in advance to the meeting.
You're just a little too efficient. What can we address that? Thank you.
Council Olson, the solution for me was to have Kristen make sure the link was on the calendar, so I had a single place always to go to log on through my calendar. So that's been mostly successful for me, instead of trying to save or highlight different email links a week ahead of time or 2 weeks ahead of time.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I've had problems with the link in my calendar, so I've always gone to the link in my email if I couldn't get those in my calendar to work. So anyway, it doesn't have to, I can find it, but maybe it's not so far in advance, it's easier.
Okay. As far as the parks and the PIP, anyway, with a P, with P's. Anyway, with the with this committee that's meeting, are you, and the open, open space, are we not, can we not attend, do you ever attend those meetings, Julie?
I have in the past, but I haven't recently. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that a way to, I know it's time consuming, but is that a way?
I'm just wondering if the council generally would like an update on,
Yeah,
because this is a fairly big part of our, yeah, anyway, if not, I can just go to Lodge and go to the advisory board, whatever, and.
right, I mean, I have no objection to getting an update. And that update would come after that meeting, is that what you're?
Well, just at some point from Galena and, you know,
Yeah.
where are they in the process of the update, and what specifically are they considering in the update, and where are we on the PIP credit?
Yeah, that, the PIP credit I really would like to get going on. We did talk about this a long time ago, and I assumed that it was happening and being worked on, but, you know, if we don't have a situation come up where we find out that it's non-existent, still non-existent, we sort of forget what was supposed to be happening. So, we can ask for that, Kathleen, if you would. Okay, any other council reports?
And just related to what was just mentioned, you know, I was at the park last night, advisory and Temple was on as well. One of the salient points of discussion was harmony. And I sent a further follow-on email to Lee and Kathleen about what's the status. I know there are a lot of moving parts being negotiated now, but they had great detailed discussion about 13th and how to bisect the park and their concern about that, and wanting to hear from Vancouver as well as the county on their position. So, I mean, we need to be open and transparent and resolve some of these issues regarding harmony. So that needs to be, they're going to send the correspondence to us as well as Vancouver. So it's going to come our way. But that came out loud and clear at the Parks Advisory Board last night.
Hey, Councilor, do we have anything else except the county manager? Anything more?
No, I don't have anything more.
Okay.
Just a reminder for tonight's listening session, log on about 10 minutes early, just so that they can get you set up and everything before it goes live. That would be great.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Thanks for your patience. See you tonight. We're adjourned.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www